Hello, it's Scott Manley here with a new tutorial, or rather a re-engineered version of an old tutorial on how to get to moons. You see, when I recorded this back in December, things have changed since then basically, and so we're going to rebuild the rocket and deal with some of the shortcomings from the previous rocket. So we're aiming to put one Kerbal on the surface of one of the moons of Kerbin. Very specifically, we're aiming for the planet, or the moon Minmus, because the moon Minmus is lower gravity and therefore best place to start. So we gotta build up our capsule. It's gonna have a parachute. It's gonna have a capsule on top of it. This is the one-man capsule. Right now, you could actually use the one-man lander can, the Mark 1 lander can, and that would be slightly lower mass. But maybe in the future they make the capsule, heat resistance matter. So I'm gonna stick with this one for now. Now, this is what's going to land back on Kerbin, but before then we're going to need a stack decoupler. Now we need a stage which will land on the planet, on the moon of Minmus. So we're going to use this rocket here, or this fuel tank here, and one of the engines, we're going to use the LV909 engine. So that will get us down. Now, this is going to have to do a whole lot of maneuvering, and it's going to get that maneuvering power from solar power, so we need to include some solar panels on this thing to make sure that it is actually able to descend to the surface. And if I put two of these on using the symmetry button, that will supply all our power needs for the whole of the trip. Now, to actually land, we're going to need 4 of these to actually land us on the surface, and got to get them so they're not red. Is that them? Yeah, they're on there straight. We can add a little ladder here on the side. Best to use one of the extendable ladders because they mass the same. So we'll stick this onto the separator stage, and that should get us to the surface, no doubt. Now, that is what we want to be landing. We now need to get this all the way out to the moon. Not to the moon, but to Minmus. So we're going to have a core stage which will have a couple of these boosters. Where are we? We're going to use the long stretch tanks here, the FLT 800. We're going to use 2 of these, and this is going to be powered by the LVT 45. Because the 45 has thrust vectoring, which will make steering it getting into orbit a whole lot easier. On top of that, we're going to help steer this thing by adding some winglets down the bottom. Add 4 of them, like that, and try to get them in the middle of this. I've missed them a little there. That will help with aerodynamic steering early on in the trip. Now, that will barely lift off as it is. What we're going to do is add some more boosters to this, and these boosters will feed their fuel into the middle. So I need to go to structural, look for the TT70 radial decoupler. We only need 2 of these, although you could add 4 if you want. There's nothing stopping you adding more at this stage. Again, we're going to use 2 of these TT800 fuel tanks, and I'm building this. Oh dear, got to get them on the decoupler like that. Build 2 of these, and attached to the bottom of this, we're going to have the more powerful engines, the LV3T30. They're more powerful, but they don't have steering built in, so they're going to rely on this core to give us the actual steering. Now, this is going to, if I sit this down, it'll put a lot of weight on this particular object, and it will probably break it. So it's a good idea to bring out the launch stability enhancers and put a couple of these on the side. Also, we probably want to have some struts to stabilize this thing. Oh, and more importantly, in addition to struts, I'm going to add some struts here. They'll go from the outside to the inside. That will kind of stop these flexing around, and add some rigidity to our launch vehicle, which will, if we're not too rigid, then what'll happen is these side rockets will oscillate and it will be much harder to control. We do not need any ASAS or anything, that comes built in. What we do need finally is these fuel ducts, these fuel pipes, will go from the inside here and go to the inner object. Now you have to make sure you do this in the right order. You have to go from the outside tank to the inside because the fuel feeds in this way. That means that when these are burned out, this one will still have 100% fuel. So we need to modify our staging here. That means pull this middle rocket from the side down, and that is all we really need here. That is us. We've got a Minmus lander, and this should get us all the way there in one go. Okay, so we're on the launch pad, ready to go. Jebediah is in his, well, he's in his seat. He's looking at everything. There's not much to see, unfortunately, but that's okay. We're going to view it from the outside. So throttle up to a 100%, and we will get going. Firing up the engines, press T, that will put us into vertical flight. Now, if you press T, that turns on automatic stabilization, which is now built into every capsule as long as it has power. If you press M right now, well, that will bring us to the map. Now we can bring up the nav ball at the bottom here. This is where we're going, Minmus, so let's set that as a target. Now you'll see, while this is going up, that there's this ascending node line. That is basically the inclination of the orbit, right? The orbits match everything along this line here. And when we get out here, we're going to have to make some sort of correction. You note that the moon doesn't have that. It's exactly in the same plane, but the moon is a lot heavier and has more gravity. Anyway, we're now starting to pick up speed, so you can throttle back a little because we do not want to exceed the aerodynamic threshold of this vehicle. So just kind of throttle back, keep it below about 200. This will save you fuel ultimately, because using too much fuel in the lower atmosphere is going to ultimately impact your endurance. We're getting up to about 10 kilometers. You don't need to turn off the SAS anymore, so just pitch over to 45 degrees kind of slowly, and you can actually start throttling back up now that we're above much of the atmosphere. And this will happen very slowly, but we should probably get down to 45 degrees sooner rather than later. Now once we get here, we're going to fly a lot of this from the map screen. After we jettison these are all clear, they're going down. Now we want to follow this prograde marker down. Now let's take a look at our orbit. Let's zoom right in, and using SAS we should be relatively stable. So if you look at that marker on the orbit, it says about 35 seconds is my time to apoapsis. This is a really good indicator of whether your trajectory is too high or too low. You kind of want to make this between about 40 and 50 seconds. As you're going more vertical, it will increase, and as you go too flat, it will decrease. So try to keep it between 40 and 50 seconds. It's generally a pretty good one. It depends upon the rocket, but it's a great indicator, so you can just trim yourself up and down and try to keep that in the right regiment or right range to get you into orbit efficiently. And I'm 35 kilometers up, so this thing will switch to orbital velocity soon. There we go. And that's our orbit there. We're just going to keep pointing this slowly downwards, just continuing to pick up speed. At this point, the aerodynamics are probably unimportant in steering it. We're mostly steering this using the capsule torque, and we're just going to keep this going down. Now that we're getting to about 50 seconds, we can actually bring it lower just a touch. It's not hugely important. We just want to get this apoapsis up to about 100. You can go straight to Minmus if you like, but I think that as a beginner learning this, you probably want to go into a parking orbit, get used to the maneuver node system and everything. There we go, 50 kilometers. We're just firing this sideways and picking up speed. 59, 60, 100 kilometers is a good one. You don't need to go that high if you don't want to. In fact, it's more efficient to go and start from like an 80 kilometer orbit, but 100 is just like a nice round number that people understand, so that's why I use it a lot. There we go, 52 kilometers, and I am losing a bit of speed here, but I think we'll be fine. So at this point we can just time accelerate up, doing you know, ×4 physical time acceleration. We're still losing altitude slowly, but it's not such a problem. Once we stop losing altitude here, that's when we want to set up the maneuver node. If you set up the maneuver node before then your maneuver node may not be correct by the time you get there because it doesn't account for these changes. Okay, so now we're definitely out of the atmosphere. Let's stick a new maneuver node in here and circularize the orbit. And again, the thing to watch for is the apoapsis and periapsis switching positions, because that's indicating that you're getting pretty close. 99, 97, that's pretty good. 94 meters per second is what I'm going to have to gain here. Not so bad. So let's come back from the map and turn ourselves to face it. 4 minutes and 50 seconds before we have to do that. But we want to get ourselves pointed in the right direction because this does not take very long to do it. Now it says it'll be a 3-second burn, but I'm probably going to do it at less than 100% thrust because I want to get the orbit more accurate. So we're just going to time accelerate at about, I don't know, ×10. That'll give us 30 seconds or so before we actually get to our node. There's the sun getting low in the sky. This is solar powered. We're going to need, if we do too much maneuvering or too much capsule rotation in the dark, then we will run out of power. But it will very quickly get that power back once we get to the daytime side. Okay, let's point this thing in the right direction one more time. It's pretty much going to be right on the horizon here. So now let's just start burning at about 1/3 power. We only have to get less than 100 meters per second here, so it's not much of a burn. Just want to keep it pointing the right way and press X to kill the rocket motors. Now click on the maneuver node and then click on the X to remove it, and we are in a relatively stable orbit. So the next thing is we need to figure out how to reach this Minmus here. So what you do is you add a maneuver node. Actually, we are pretty much coming over the horizon. What you want to do is look at the model and get it right on there, and that's pretty much when you want to be making your burn. But you want to then grab the peri G, or the retrograde marker, and watch that go. Bring that up. Oh, there's a lunar encounter. We don't want that. We want to get this all the way out to 46,000. 44, 46, 48, right? So that's us touching exactly the orbit of Minmus, but when we get there, Minmus is not going to be there, unfortunately. So we have to figure out where our best encounter will be. We can do a couple of things. First of all, we can actually grab the middle orbit, and you've got to make sure the right thing is highlighted when you're grabbing it. Move it backwards along the orbit, and you see that what it's doing is it's saying the target position is there, and that's where I am at that point. Those are pretty close. Now, to get that on there, you could make a change to the inclination here, but that would be very inefficient. However, if you select, this is a good place to do it actually, it's just out beyond the orbit of the moon. I'm going to select it here, add a maneuver. And now we want to go down so that we end up arriving at Minmus when it's there. And there we go. 2 maneuvers and we're going to get to Minmus. And that's a very low power maneuver there. So we're going to need 907 meters per second from this one. And I don't know, probably about 15 or thereabouts from that. I don't honestly know. We're not on a free, I guess we will encounter and then we'll be in a somewhat free return. But right now, we want to time accelerate. Well, we want to point our spacecraft in the correct direction, right? And let's do that. So use the nav ball, rotate the spacecraft to point it at the node. And there we go. Okay, start time accelerating. And this is a good time to kind of fly over the surface and just watch this, watch it below us. Appreciate Kerbin for one last time before we head off to the moon of Minmus. We may not be seeing it again if we mess things up. 15 minutes, 14 minutes. So we're just gotta let that time acceleration happen. And you see how the actual maneuver vector is moving off. That sometimes happens, and you just may need to correct. But as long as you're pointing roughly the right direction to start with, you should more or less be pretty close. Okay. So with 34-second burn, we're going to burn just before, but I suspect actually we are going to run out of fuel before then. So I'm going to start burning now. And it says 34 seconds, but I don't think we are going to get that out of our fuel tank. I think we're going to run out before then. And then we're going to have to switch to this second rocket, which isn't nearly as powerful. Right now we're accelerating at about 3G. And when we run out of fuel, I'll ditch it. There we go. And now we're only accelerating about 1 point something G. So we're not going nearly as fast. So that's a good idea that I started burning extra early. Okay. But we're just going to follow this blue vector all the way around. The faster you can perform the burn, the less corrections you need to do to keep that on there. And we're stopping. That's pretty close. Okay, where are we? Well, we can remove this one just now because that was a maneuver based on the... What the deuce? Oh yeah, we got a second thing here. Okay, how close do we get? We're pretty close. So let's just do this manually. Stick it back on the prograde vector. Then you want to thrust until your orbit's apoapsis just over 46,000 kilometers. There we go. Okay, that's pretty cool. And you see that it wants to... It's not sure which one to use here. So let's go to the... Let's go out here. You want to go beyond the moon's orbit because at that point you're moving more slowly and you get more efficient use of your plane change. So I'm going to grab this again and move it down very slowly and hopefully we'll get an encounter. There we go. That's us got a really good encounter. 14 meters per second. I estimated 15. I think that's pretty good. I'll just bring this down a little more. We'll be coming in over the poles here. So now I'm going to bring it down even lower. You see how the output orbit is inclined? We want to kind of get that roughly at the same angle, and that will indicate that we're actually arriving along the equator. And that's pretty good. So that'll be us arriving along the equator of Minmus with a periaps of 425. And since we're on the outward bound vector, we shall probably encounter it in the correct direction. But I don't... It's very hard to tell from this. There is a way to change the configuration file so you see these things. Anyway, since we're burning down, the vector will be at the 180 position. Let's point it there and time accelerate. Let's come out of the map and watch our time acceleration. 4 hours, so you can afford to accelerate at about times 1000. Don't miss the node, although it's, you know, you don't have to be super precise on this one because you're actually... There's a lot of leeway for correction in this one. And 14, 17 minutes, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. It says a 1 second burn. As long as we're pretty close to this, it shouldn't matter too much. Okay, there we go. I'm actually just going to burn slightly early because I want to get this video done. So let's start this engine. We're going to burn super slowly. And I'm going to actually just watch the output here. You can see it coming down. And remember, we're looking for the ejection orbit to be somewhat flat. And kill. Maybe just a little more X. There we go. That's pretty good. So we can, of course, remove the old maneuver node. Right click on it. And that's us. That's us. We're going to encounter the planet Minmus, the moon of Minmus. We're going to fly past it at 400 kilometers and then we will get returned to the planet Kerbin. But before then, we are going to correct ourselves and get into orbit. So it's actually a good idea to try setting up a maneuver node. Now the hard part is if you mouse over these orbits, see how the little maneuver ball is different colors? You want the yellow one here. You want to make sure you're doing the right one because if you don't get that, then you could find yourself in the wrong you could find yourself adjusting the wrong orbit. So all I'm going to do is set up a 0 manoeuvre node, essentially a manoeuvre node with no manoeuvres happening, that we're going to use as a timer so I can at least look outside and watch this timer to the encounter going down. Now if you look at the map, you'll see that the orbit changed colour as it got close to Minmus. That's because it entered the sphere of influence. And this is an important thing in Kerbal Space Program. You only get the gravity from one planet, so when you're close to Minmus, you're getting Minmus gravity only, and when you're slightly further away, you're perhaps getting Kerbin's gravity. So you've got to keep this in mind, that once we get inside that, we're going to then have to circularize our orbit with respect to Minmus to make sure that we don't fly past it. And there it is. We're coming in towards it, and we're actually coming in the same direction, which is a good sign. Okay, there we go. We're coming in towards the sphere of influence. And so at this point, I might want to adjust my orbit. You see, it's actually already projecting a different orbit here because I'm already inside the sphere of influence at this point. So I can bring myself closer to the planet. That would be more efficient, but I think I'll just do this. I'll add the maneuver here, and we'll do a retrograde burn. And what we want to do is put ourselves into an elliptical orbit. And now we want to bring this node down. Bring it down to about 30 kilometers or thereabouts. Not too low, not too high. Remember, the mountains on Minmus are very high. So we have a 210 meter per second burn. And that will be along this vector here. It'll be a 14-second burn using this rocket. It's not the most efficient way I'm doing this. I'm just trying to do it the most... I'm trying to match, your skill set, let's say. So I don't want to add super complicated trim maneuvers and everything to get this most efficient. I just want to land this thing and demonstrate that it is actually pretty easy to do this in a single mission. 17, 16, again, watching the clock tick down. And you don't want to overdo this one, because if you overdo it, you end up with an orbit that intersects the surface. And if you end up with an orbit that intersects the surface, you're going to have to spend fuel correcting it. So yeah, we do this about 50% burn, so it happens so that we get through it quickly, but so that we can actually correct it at the end. There we go. So we're going to come in slightly inclined, but not so inclined that it's going to cause a problem. And throttle back and press X when you're there. So how are we looking? It's 23 kilometers, that's acceptable. So now we're going to come down and we want to set a maneuver here to circularize our orbit and actually commit towards the landing. So we'll circularize first. So we put ourselves into a nice relatively low orbit, and then once we're in a low orbit we can actually pick our landing site, hopefully. And if we can pick our landing site, it's important to pick your landing site on Minmus because there's all these flat areas and there's these hilly areas, and landing on the hilly areas can be very dangerous. So let's again time accelerate. 3 hours. Oh, not too fast. Oh, okay, 30 seconds to go, and I'm pointing the wrong way. 3-second burn. Here we go. 45 meters per second, and actually there's a nice flat bit there. I shall probably just use that, but I want to get this in a circular orbit first just so I can at least demonstrate the technique. There we go. So kill the maneuver node once again, and we're 20 kilometers there, 27 kilometers there. We are actually going to pass over a flat area, but that's perhaps not the place we want to go. We could aim for these highlands here. We don't know how smooth those will be, or we could just wait in orbit until we find a much nicer area. But we have this really good landing site underneath us, so what we're going to do is wait until we're on the opposite side of the planet and then perform another retrograde burn to bring our periaps really low over the landing site so we can actually perform our landing from there. Right, what we're going to do is initiate a descent burn about 90 degrees or 180 degrees away from where you're actually going to land. And that's the most efficient way to do that. We're going to bring this down to about 11. Now, you gotta be careful that you don't actually hit these mountains here. But I think if we bring this down to 5, that should be pretty good. That gives us 3 kilometers. That should be okay. Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to do a 9 meters per second burn in 10 minutes. And this is just the most efficient way. It means that we're getting ourselves close to the surface without burning a lot of fuel. 5, 4... You could just brute force it, but if you want to do things efficiently, this is the way to do it. Okay, turn myself around now, find that node. The nodes are almost always aligned with the prograde or retrograde vectors. So there we go. 9 meters per second. Just do this as careful as possible because we don't want to overdo this one either, because we could end up colliding with mountains. 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay, and that's us. So now I'm gonna, well, actually I'm just gonna time accelerate because we want to get ourselves down. We should probably kill that maneuver node, click on it, and at this point we are gonna attempt our landing. It's a good idea to hit F5 incidentally to quick save, and remember holding F9 will reload the quick save. Because it's very easy to get into a situation where you screw up for no reason other than, you know, nothing that's... Well, it's very annoying to screw up and then have to go all the way back. I guess that's the thing. At least if you screw up with quick save enabled, you can recover. And that's pretty good. We got over these mountains. And so if I press V incidentally, I can adjust the camera angle here. So now we can see a clear plane ahead of us. We want to wait until we get close to the surface. So what I'm going to do here is burn and watch that periapsis go down. We want to make sure that we're going to land before we touch the surface here. So we bring that over, bring that down, and then now it's just a case of making sure that I stop before I hit the surface. So there we go. Well, you could actually, you know, what you can do incidentally, if you really are loving maneuver nodes, you can actually create a maneuver node like right here, about there, and then basically one that will actually kill all the orbital velocity, something like that, and then move it right close to the surface. And it'll tell you that you need 10 seconds to perform that burn. So you can actually follow that and do it at t minus 10 seconds, and you should hopefully be able to kill all your velocity if you like. Let's demonstrate that. So unfortunately we have to wait for time. We can't do physical. We can't have to do physical time acceleration now because we are too low. It is afraid that we will screw things up if we do regular time acceleration. Of course, to access physical time acceleration while in a vacuum, you hold Alt and press the time accelerate key so that you actually get physical rather than regular time acceleration. Good thing to know. Okay, so we're getting to about 10 seconds. It says it's going to be a 10-second burn. We're 1.5 kilometers up. So ready to thrust. Press G to deploy the gear and fire those engines. And we're just going to kill all our lateral velocity pretty much. And there we go. So we're in surface mode now. Ignore the blue one now and just follow this. This will be our descent vector. We're going to pick up velocity as we fall towards the surface again, but you see that we got pretty close to the surface just on the strength of that maneuver node. Minmus's gravity is pretty slow. It's accelerating me at less than 1 meter per second. It'll take us a little while to get down there, so let's do time acceleration again. We can accelerate at just over 1 meter per second, so even if you're moving 30 meters per second, you know, you can burn during the last 100 meters or so and just be fine. I'm gonna start firing this engine at about, let's do 1/3 thrust. We want to keep, now that we're below 200 meters, we want to bring our velocity down and keep it below about 10 meters per second. And so you're going to adjust this. You don't want to be descending too fast, don't want to be descending too slow, because if you spend a lot of time in descent, then you will waste more fuel. As you get down low, you want to try and adjust your velocity so you hit 0 meters per second at the surface, and then press X. And we're there! That's a beautiful landing, I have to say. It's rather better than I expected to happen. So let's extend the ladder, bring Jebediah out, and you know what? He can actually just let go and jump off the surface. Oh, just EVA him onto the surface. That's the best way. The ladder is not necessary on Minmus. You can fly. So now, most important thing, of course, is to plant the flag. Very important. Flag comes out. Kerbal's space program. I landed. Yay! Okay, so you can commemorate your first victory here, and then you can get back on board, and then it's just a case of trying to get back to the planet Kerbin. So this is a lot easier to get back because all you need to do is escape Minmus going backwards. So the first thing we're going to do is launch with the rotation of the planet, and that means we're going to turn towards the 90-degree vector again, right? Of course, you've probably not landed in the same way as you take off from the launch site, so you want to make note of what direction that is on the map, on the nav ball. So there we go, just aiming straight towards it. And you can pretty much go almost horizontal right away. The only danger is you might have some mountains nearby on Minmus. That's especially true here. And in fact, I've completely overcooked this, but I have plenty of fuel left, so that's not a problem. Just circularize this. So again, pick it, circularize. You don't need to circularize on leaving Minmus, but it helps. In fact, yeah, there's planet Kerbin. We're just coming over here. If we zoom out, you may think that you could just burn towards the planet Kerbin, but that would be monumentally inefficient. You actually want to burn, well, you actually want to burn right there. You want to be heading backwards along the orbit, so take a look at the way the orbit is. You want to be going that way so that it kills your velocity. So actually, if I move this maneuver node, we could just forget about the escape, the circularizing burn about there, then bring that out, and you see that it shows the purple, the orbit, and it shows you where we're going to end up, right? So we want to bring the periaps on Kerbin down to under 70 kilometers, and so you want to kind of adjust these things a little to minimize it. The inclination can actually be really significant when you're escaping. Also note there's another Mooner encounter there. 422, and that's an encounter. Let's 27. So there we go. That's relatively good. Okay, so you could. It's not a perfect escape because the apoapsis is there. You really want the apoapsis to be like inside this node, but that's pretty good. If you're having an apoapsis that's like way out to the left or the right, then that's inefficient. But this one is pretty good. You want this yellow line to be exactly backwards along the orbit for best efficiency. Anyway, it's a 200 meter per second burn. It's going to be 12 seconds, and it's going to be 13 minutes from now. So let's use that. 11, 10, 9. We don't want to miss this because, of course, that will send us back into the surface of Minmus. Okay, and there we go. And find that vector. Now we've got a little off the center because we added an inclination change as well. And just wait for it to go down. It's okay to overshoot in this one. You'll just come down steeper and faster. And there we go. Let's see where we are. 99. So the 99. Let's just bring it down till we're 20. They are 17. That's pretty good. Kill the maneuver node. We don't need it anymore. We don't need this stale node. In fact, all we need is to time accelerate and wave bye-bye to Minmus and our grand conquest. Leave the sphere of influence of Minmus. Don't go like 100,000 time acceleration because you might actually fly through the planet Kerbin. 10,000 is just fine. There we are, falling towards it. As we fall towards it, we see we have actually plenty of fuel. We could have probably land this on the surface under power, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to fire the parachute because it's a whole lot easier to just use the parachute as our descent stage. Okay, and let's turn this around right now. Looks like we're coming down over the deserts. You know, Soviet style. And so let's point the thing backwards, because in real life you would want this capsule to be pointing backwards along the orbit. Press space to eject it. It will continue on its way. Don't deploy the parachute just yet, because it's very likely that future versions will result in parachutes being destroyed. Also note that I've got the stabilizer turned on and it's wobbling a lot. This is burning power, so you might want to just turn that off. Dear, or just... Whoa, why is this thing turning like a crazy thing? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna point it there. I said I'm gonna point it there. Wow, this is really spinning for some reason. I'm gonna press Alt X to cancel my maneuver nodes, but I guess that ain't the answer. We don't want to run out of power during this descent. That would be really unfortunate. Okay. There's no time acceleration going on. I don't really understand why this is. Regardless, it's not going to matter right now. It's probably not going to matter in any version anytime soon. We are going to be able to get down with the fuel that we have. We're going to experience the power of re-entry. In fact, I think if I just let this go now, the parachute might just keep it stable if I turn this off. There we go. Yeah, the parachute has higher drag even when it's not deployed, which is very similar to the Mercury capsule, which actually had like a spoiler sitting on top of it, so that if it came in pointing the wrong direction, it would flip itself around using aerodynamics. Obviously the bottom of this getting heated to some ridiculous amount, ridiculous temperature simply by the shock heating. The force of the atmosphere being pushed up against it is like it's like an engine, right? Like a diesel engine where the gas is heated by compression inside the cylinder. Okay, so we're almost through re-entry. We might get Mach effects. Let's just follow it down using time acceleration. Okay, so we don't need to deploy the parachute until you're below, you know, till you're more than a few 100 meters up or whatever, until you're more than a few kilometers up. If you deploy it too early, it just takes longer to fall to the surface. I would wait for your velocity to drop below, you know, 150, just because it just seems right not to deploy a parachute going at half the speed of sound. But you may find that you run out of landscape before then. Parachute is deployed, and soon we shall deploy. Once we're below 500 meters, that will deploy automatically to 100%. If, of course, you are over land, then it will be 500 meters above the land that it deploys. And that means it could be deploying very, very high up. But over the sea, it's going to be 500. Yes! And so at this point, you can time accelerate to get down to the surface. Cancel the time acceleration just before you land. And then you will have returned victoriously. And you can walk around with some swagger, knowing that you can, in fact, get to moons. As I said, we do Minmus because it requires a whole lot less fuel. Once you've figured that out, you can build a bigger rocket and go to the moon, but that'll be some other episode of your Kerbal life. Until then, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.